Welcome to the Kindred Journey Podcast, the podcast where women share their experiences of stepping into courage when comfort is no longer an option. This is the podcast for connecting in community with women who have been shaped by the liberating to challenging seasons that life endures. I am your host, Lesley. I am a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. I too have experienced these seasons in life, and I want you to know that you are surrounded by a community of courageous, real women here for you. I can't wait to connect, so grab your favorite beverage and join me on this kindred journey. I loved this conversation with Brooke. We deep dive into how after she became a working mom, she became lost in her sense of purpose. We explore her desire to lean into her identity in the workforce, which led her to working more than she wanted and caused her to outsource her identity of being a mom, which later led Brooke to exiting the corporate world altogether. We talk about action as where you actually learn and how to identify with what alignment means to you. We dig into what the messy middle looks like and how your comfort zone expands when connecting to your true identity and remaining curious with what makes you happy while embracing the messy middle. Please roll up your sleeves and join me for this rich conversation as we get messy in the middle with this dear friend of mine, Brooke Koeninger. Well, hello, Brooke. How are you?
I am great. How are you, Lesley?
Oh, I'm so much better now that we're having this opportunity to chat
I
and
know.
connect. And
I just love this. I love it.
yes, me too. The first time that we connected, I felt like I could talk to you for hours, or it was like I was having a glass of wine with an old friend and just picking up right where we left off.
So the feeling is absolutely mutual, but this is just a sign that you're doing the right thing. Like, just having deep conversations and doing this podcast. So thank you for having me back.
No, well, thank you.
It fills my cup up as well.
Well, good. I'm glad the feeling is totally mutual. So I know a little bit about you, but maybe you can tell our listeners and share just a little bit about yourself and what your backstory is.
So I will give the 2-minute version, and then
Perfect.
You can give me more or less of any of that. So I'm a former, I like to say I'm a former corporate ladder climber, people-pleasing perfectionist. So that's up until about 2.5 years ago. So I was in corporate, and my background is in finance and strategy. So I was doing consulting for a while. 2.5 years ago, we can get into that, I left to become a coach. I started consulting and coaching with small businesses, helping them grow. And I still do that. But through the last 2 years of leaning into being a business coach, I really uncovered my passion, which is female, either wannabe or currently business owners, meaning me, where I was 2 years ago. So women that have these wonderful ideas and either want to start their business or in the process and want to grow it. And so that's what I've been leaning into in the last, call it, year and a half, is really being a business and life coach, because it's so much more, especially for women and moms, than just your business. You need to kind of look holistically. So over the last kind of year and a half, that's what I've been leaning more into, is really focusing on female entrepreneurs and growing their business.
Awesome. Well, we might have to have a whole nother conversation about that, because I'm new to this podcast is a passion project, but also, there's a business side to it. So trying to embrace it all.
I just love it so much. I do love business side. And it was crazy when I was doing it before for corporate. It just took me a while, but how I was misaligned. But when I sat with it, I was like, the part that I love is growing businesses, and the part that I'm passionate about is women and their potential. And I'm like, if I can put that together, and it's like solving this amazing, puzzle, putting a puzzle together, which I love, it's like a problem solving thing. So anyways, we can sit down whenever you want and talk more about that.
Perfect.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think that's a great intro into where, past, present, and future, where you're going, and a little bit about your story the last few years and how it's kind of unfolded. So we're just gonna dive right in. But before we do, I just want you to know that this is a space for you to share your story. It is honored and respected. So please feel free to speak freely. And I just, sometimes vulnerability doesn't come easy to some. It does for me for whatever reason, but some it's not. So this might just showing up on this podcast might
Thank
be
you.
a step of courage. And so I
Thank you.
appreciate you being here. So
That's really
thank
sweet of you
you.
to say. That's really, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, if you
Yeah.
could maybe share with us, our listeners, a
Yeah.
season or moment that you have either been forced into courage or have stepped into courage when comfort was truly no longer an option.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this, knowing that I was going to be chatting with you too. And um, so two things, I want to kind of tell it from two sides, and it's going to focus around me eventually leaving my corporate job and stepping into what I'm doing now. Um, but I'll say how I came to that conclusion, but then also the learning from it and
Mm.
why it took me so long. So I forever thought of leaving my job as kind of waving the white flag and being like, I can't do it anymore because, and I can give all the reasons, the stress had increased. My husband was in his corporate job. I say I'd outsourced my identity being a mom. I have 3 children and to my corporate job. So what was my title and who did I work for? And like, that was kind of it. And so the desire to lean into that as my whole identity drove me to work way more than I should, care more about, kind of how I was perceived at work. And having 3 kids was asking more and more of me at home. And so what I didn't realize is, call it over a decade, because my kids are 7 years apart from the first and the third, but through time, like over about 10 years, I kind of woke up one day, and the pandemic really did. I'm a statistic around that too, like the great resignation. I actually ended up leaving in 2021. So amongst the pandemic, but I kind of woke up and I was like, I have totally lost myself and what I like. And is this really the life that I want to lead? And it was not a wake up all of a sudden, but I remember going into one of my jobs. I had switched within the same company, but I had just taken a different job, and it was a position that others loved the team they were working with. It was with these amazing creative, like just so smart team. They loved working together, personality great, fun work. And in my mind, I was like, oh, finally I've made, like, this is going to be it. This is awesome. I'm going to just love going into work every day. Cause Saturday night feeling starts coming. I was used to all that and kind of complaining and working around the clock. But so this was going to be the answer to, like, I know you can love your job. And I was doing it. And like 2 months in, I'm like, it almost made me more miserable because the people I was around were really loving what they were doing. So I kept having this mirror of like, can I just not be happy? Like, is that just me? Like, I don't know what I like. I'm just always going to be unhappy. And so I kept pointing it around to myself, but in a negative way, like, you just need to figure out how to make yourself happy. And so, but I think that was essentially the turning point at one point where I was like, okay, this isn't it for work. And, I'd come home and my husband and I would just be like passing ships at night, and he'd be like, how was your day? And I'm like, fine. And never, it was my, it was like not bad, but it wasn't great. It was like, fine. And then the kids were getting taken care of, but not by us, and then,
Right.
so we'd have like arguments a little bit about like, I'd be like, well, who's going to take him to baseball practice? Or there's a conference. And he'd be like, we have a babysitter that's doing that. And I'd be like, we should do it. And so there was little instances that kept building up that was like signs that my values, I wasn't in alignment with it. I wasn't really loving what I was doing. And so I say all those details because I did wake up one day and I was like, this isn't it. And I need something different. And I was still super in my head. And I talked to a lot of women, like I was stressed, but I didn't get into my body and be like, what is happening? What do I like? What do I not like? I was still like, okay, let me figure out the plan. Let me figure out the plan and let's figure it out. I'm going to leave and I'm going to start another business. And here's what we're going to do. And this is going to make it better. But I want to say, when I was thinking about leaving and all of this stuff that kind of, and I should say too, the pandemic. So the kids were at home, homeschooling, so all that stuff was happening at the same time, but there were signs way earlier that I wasn't in alignment, you'd say like, but I looked around me at the people that I was around, like meaning most work wise, but even friends of, other my kids' friends, parents that were all working, and it was kind of common to just be like, you don't love your job, it's fine. So there was a little bit of like this, everyone was like, that's just how it is, so I'm like, who am I to expect more happiness, more, whatever it may be, fulfillment, more joy, whatever. And I was looking at others, especially around the pandemic, and saying others have it so much worse. So who am I to say, like, I should be grateful. We have our health, like my husband and I have our jobs. So that's when the question was like, what, like, either forced you or, like what chose you to make a change. I had to sit with it because I was like, I think actually the reverse is like, I felt like I couldn't choose myself for too long because there wasn't like this thing, like a horrible thing that happened or cut from our job. I was like, I should be happy. And a lot of women I talked to, I wanted to point that out because I think there's like either, I used to say blissfully unaware of how it could be better. That's not the case, but I think there's just an acceptance of like, I should be happy with what I have. And that is not to say you should, like that's not to push against that. That is such a, like a whole, like a good way to, nice way to think, if I don't know the right word to use, but I think that stops a lot of women from saying, but it could be amazing. It could be amazing. And what would that be to even think about what that would be? And so I go back to that, like finally leaving my job. I was still like kind of this analytical, like plan, like business, here's what I'm going to do. I still had never spent the time with myself to be like, who am I separate from my identity of my job and as a mom? Mm-hmm. And for me, it was only one or the other. It's like, if I left my job, I'm waving this white flag saying like, I failed, I give up, I can't do it. So that means I'm going to stay at home and be a full on mom, which so many kudos to women that choose that and are doing that. But that also wasn't, I'm not the best mom when I'm right all the time. And so I couldn't think of it in between. And so leaving was this kind of started this journey that I hadn't thought of, because when you're always in your head instead of doing, action is where you actually learn, of how much could come from that too, and that joy doesn't mean that you're ignoring others and but you can lean into, and being your best self is actually so much better for others. It's not a selfish thing. I'll pause there. Is any of that resonant?
Oh my gosh, I'm taking notes. I'm just like, yes.
It's like a lot of words to answer that one question.
I think what you experienced is normal.
Yeah.
Unfortunate, or it's labeled as normal because in the industry, especially, I'm a new-ish mom with a son under 2 and another one on the way. So I think I've been told so many times, when I started back to work, oh, it's normal to feel this shitty,
It's
like, well, that sucks. Like that this is normal, like this is normalized, to have a hard time of, like you said, I feel like so many women do get lost in motherhood and their identity as an employee. It's like, but who am I? What do I enjoy? Because it's a lot of time consumption between showing up for a full-time job and the roles that you had before you were a mom, like a wife and your own individual self. But then these other roles start to just kind of snowball effect. And then you kind of just get caught up in it and you're like, whoa, wait a second, what do I even enjoy anymore? It is normal, but I want to unnormalize it. I think it's something that so many people can resonate with.
And you know what, Lesley, it's such a good point, because I want to say too, like, when you have like your situation, for instance, and I've talked to, when I was there too, like young kids that need so much from you. And so I talked to a lot of women too, who are like, that's all well and good, Brooke. Great. I mean, but like, I literally have zero time. I don't have time, like, especially when the needs are so great from the kids. And then you're trying to go back to work and you're still pumping or nursing and you're like trying to get back in the routine. One, to your point, there are some things that are just unfortunately normalized that, okay, that's just it. Moms are just going to be tired. You're going to have to just kind of bear down. And then there's macro factors too, which we know, which is like, women unfortunately take on more of the invisible labor, and there's the mental, like there's a ton of things you're fighting against. But what I also think happens, and at least for me, was that becomes normalized over time. So as the kids so now my youngest is in kindergarten. So I have a 12 to 5-year-old. So as they get older, there is many needs, but they're more autonomous. They can do it. I'm now driving them around and helping them with homework in a different way. And so as that happens, there was a period of time where I forgot to even know that I could be put first. And I'll use an example. So, there is a period of time where maybe you have to say like, okay, I'm not going to be able to do the things like I've got a kid I've got to put to bed at 6 and then another at 8, and I've got to make sure I pump and all that stuff. But what happened for me was that became normal in my everyday life. So when it got to the point where I could choose, so now we're looking at evening activities for the kids, for instance, and I have 3 of them. So like the week was filled, right? I'm looking at the calendar. I'm like, who's doing football, who's doing soccer, gymnastics, whatever it is. And we had a Monday night that opened up because one of them, their practices ended. And I immediately, my first thought was, how do I fill that Monday? Oh, one of them wants to do piano, or I can maybe try and fit that in. But I had been saying forever how I wanted to try and get into like a workout class, and how cool would it be to try like a dance, like a hip hop class. Like there was one, and I was like, but realistically, I'm never going to fit that in. It was not even on my radar to think about how to fit that in when time opened up. I was immediately like, okay, how am I going to like serve the kid, others' needs more? And so I think the thing I've talked to some women who are just like, it kind of is frustrating when you hear like, okay, great, like do more for like self-care, great, but I don't have the time. But for me, I think the difference is just the awareness of what you're giving up. And there is a period of time where probably you're not going to, but like, remember it. And remember that, like, you know what, it has been 2 weeks since I've, done anything for myself or whatever. So when you do, like, you are still top of mind for yourself. And so that's like, there was 10 years of I hadn't. And so it finally hit me. I'm like I use my husband, like it was during the pandemic. And so I talk about kind of work. There was like this, like, it was like a mirror moment or, kind of awareness of like, God, everyone else loves this and I don't. And that finally showed me like, oh, it's not normal to just like, like work is a grind and you kind of do it. And then at home, I remember during the pandemic, so my husband loves golfing. That's like his hobby. And so we had 3 kids. I've shared this story before, but we have 3 kids that were being homeschooled, like 100% homeschool on their computer. My middle child was a kindergartner. So, like I had to log him onto his computer and then and it wasn't, you have meetings from like 12 to 1 and his, like my meeting and his was like, he had to go on at like 12:07 and then be off at like 12:32.
Right.
It was, and then I had a 2-year-old that was just running around. So they got to this point where I was like, so from a personal perspective, Aaron, my husband, he'd be like, this is kind of great. We're all healthy and like he could go golfing all that, like golfing, like shot up, right? Cause you're outside, right. It's clear. And he couldn't go into the office. So he'd have time. He could like in on a Tuesday afternoon. And I was like, I was like gonna lose my SHIT. Like I was like, I have nothing else I can fit in here. I'm so worried about the kids logging on and off. They have to figure out how to do their home. Like I have to teach my child how to write numbers and draw kindergarten. I don't, so anyways, that was the personal thing that I was like, I have so much in my, like, I can't even, and if I could run away, I would, but I can't, there's nowhere I can go because we can't go anywhere. So all that to say, I think there's an acknowledgement that sure, there is time. You're not always gonna be able to put yourself first, but I just don't even think that we know until it gets to a point where we're like, I'm gonna lose it. I want to yell at everyone all the time. I'm so angry or I'm stressed or whatever it is. You have no patience in the morning for anybody. Then like those are signs like you have not met your needs in way too long, And so that's kind of what came for me from some of that process. I'm like, I am so far off. Like, I don't even know what it feels like in my body to be happy or excited or sad. Like it's just so much emotion built up. And I've got to like work through all of that and figure out what's going on here to rediscover like, what do I love? It's been so long. So
I don't think you're alone in that. And thank you for, I call it the mom overload or, I've heard it and it's like, it shouldn't be that way. Like you said, your husband was more ready to go golfing and like you're thinking about all these other things. And it's so interesting to me how, like you said, that mental load of what moms kind of just take on because I feel like it's just innate in us as mothers. I don't know how better to express that, but a few other things that you touched on was like
Yeah.
comparative suffering was like
Yeah.
COVID. Oh, people have it so much worse. Like
Yes.
I've been stuck in that too. We're like, oh, I should, and the shoulds, like
Yes.
you should
Yeah.
yourself, you
Yes.
know, and like, oh, I should be grateful or I should be happy or I should be, but it's like everything that you just expressed to me is, you know, that you're not in alignment with yourself,
Yeah.
but you
Yes.
know, you don't know what you want, or, you know, you're still, you know, you need to explore and figure out how to get there. And I think, again, when you become a mom, I feel like shit gets real. Like you figure out
Yeah.
like more about yourself becoming
Yes.
a mom than I
Yes.
realized or anticipated, because I feel like
100%.
I'm learning new things about myself every day. But which is, you know, in my mid
What
30s,
your
and
triggers are, what you like, what it says about you, certain parenting style, all the things. You're like, I thought it was done. I thought it was done.
yeah, I thought I did the whole self-growth, self-exploration thing in my 20s. But no, we're continuing on
We're
forward.
going through
So,
the
and
cycle.
yeah, I heard 40s are the new 30s.
Oh
So
my
I'm looking
God.
forward to
Oh my
that
God.
next.
You know what? I will say, so I'm in my 40s and I was like, so my 30s were having children. Like it was just felt like I had my first when I was 30 and then 38 was my last. And so now I'm like, I turned 40 during the pandemic also again, but I was like, this is, and I think that all that was probably part of it too, but I was like, this is going to be my decade. I am not dreading 40. I'm like forever for 10 years. I was about, I had lost myself, you know, and because I also didn't want to admit how much kids change you, and that like my priorities clearly did change, and it doesn't make me less of a ambitious working woman, but I do want to be around my children and be there for all their games and like be like part of their homework every night. Like I wanted a different relationship than my job was allowing me, and I didn't know how to reconcile those. But for my 40s, I was like, I am taking back. This is going to be about me, because there was a time like I didn't believe this when I started this kind of new journey, like when I left my job, but I am so much better when I do prioritize myself. And it was so crazy that I had to put it again about others before I would accept to do it for myself. Meaning, like, I started seeing how I was, again, way more patient with my kids. And it is 100% true. You've heard the saying, like, the moms, like, if I don't know for you, like emotions and attitude in the house, like if I am frustrated, every one of my children are at wit's end, they're yelling, like it's like a vibe and energy. And so when I could just be calmer, because I'm like, like I made sure to whatever fills up my cup for the day, you know, bucket, like it is. And so then I was like, hey, listen, they are so much better when I'm better, you know? And it was like, I put it around them, but to all that to say, but I was like, 40, this is the decade that I'm going to figure out what makes me the best me. I'm going to figure it out, health wise, professional wise, like holistically. And that's when I started leaning in. I'm like, others women can do this. It is not waving the white flag, being like, I'm giving up or I'm not grateful because, you know, others have it worse. It is like, imagine how impactful and like you can be when you are in alignment, you're doing something you love, you have high energy every day, like that women could take on the work, you know, like if you can just be in alignment. I was like, okay, if I can figure this out for myself and help other women do that, that is the unlock for me. Like I have unlimited energy all day doing that, you know, it's so crazy. So anyways, that was a long one.
No, I love that. I love you. I love your energy. I gravitated to you immediately when we first connected. And, you know, I think something that you said is prioritize, you know, you prioritize. It's not that you don't have the time, it's that you choose not to prioritize, whether it's getting out for a 10-minute walk. You can make that. And that's what I've learned. I used to be a very much all or nothing person. Like if I don't have 60 minutes to go to the gym, then I'm not going. And it's like, no, I have a Peloton in my garage. Let's go hop on it for 10 minutes and see how you like. It's just stepping away from either the people pleasing or pleasing at work or whatever it is. Like it's prioritizing yourself over the others is what, you know, how you classified it, because that's going to make it's a ripple effect for everybody. Like you said, it's your energy is going to carry, it's a vibrational energy thing that carries on to the people that you surround yourself with. And I think that's beautiful. I think it's so beautiful. And something else that you said is and maybe this is where you can kind of go into your next segue is
Yeah.
action is where you actually learn. And I love
Yeah.
that because you
Yeah.
kind of knew you had all these pieces building, COVID, your job, you weren't happy, fulfillment, alignment, all these things, outsourcing
Yeah.
yourself as a mom, to like you wanted to be, you knew what you wanted,
Yeah.
and you kind of had this vision of helping women and business building and
Yeah.
how you could kind of merge the two. So maybe how did you take action in this season of courage and moving forward into this next journey that is unfolding?
Yeah. I mean, so many things, but I love how you're just talking about like it doesn't have to be all or nothing, like the 10 minutes on the Peloton. It's such a good metaphor because even when I left, I was still in my head, meaning here's the plan, and I even told myself, but again, it was in the head. It was like, okay, I know I'm going to be feeling like I left my identity. I'm going to have to work through that. But like, I didn't know what that actually felt like. Like I kept saying things in my head and then it would manifest in this time. Like for me, it's anxiety. So others, it's panic attack, it's stress, can't sleep, whatever. But anxiety for me is like chest, I feel nauseous, like really hot, and it would be in random times. Like I'm going to a fun concert with my husband and I'm like, what is happening? And so when we say small things, like even when I left, I was still in my head. And part of it was like, how do you feel? The only way to get in alignment and start moving towards what you want is to do something, reflect, how did that feel? And really know what that means for you. And so when even like, you should prioritize yourself, and self-care. And I'll go back to my husband again. He's very good at what he needs. Like, I think a lot of men are like, he knows what he needs. He needs, workout in the morning that clears his head. And he needs, golfing 4 hours with his buddies. And like, that gives him like, he's very clear on it. And I was like, well, maybe I should try golfing. And I'm like, that does not fill me up. But I didn't even know what does that feel like for me? Is it relaxing? Do I need energy? Do I want to, and it's like a workout, right? Until when you're working out and you're like, I want to build muscle or I want to get more flexible, like that can mean so many different things for different people. And for me, it was losing the head space. Well, I'm always going to be in my head and planning or whatever, but really figuring out what that means in your body. And so when you said like 10 minutes on the treadmill or, it is as much about the outcome, which is like, I want to be happier or I want to have, lose a couple pounds or be more stressed, whatever it is, as proving to yourself for the first time in however long that you can prioritize yourself. And doing that for 10 minutes, it's like, it is a muscle. It's a muscle that is going to feel, your brain is going to create all these reasons why it can't, just like, go back to the analogy and let me know if this resonates. But again, my oldest is 12. And so we played football this year. And so for the first time, he's like, working out in a way that his muscles are sore. And he was like, he came home one time, he was like, Mom, I think I've hurt myself. And he was like, I gotta sit out of practice. Like, I think I, sprained in whatever his arm or something. And I was like, I sat with him for a little bit and I talked him through. I was like, that means you're working your muscles, you're getting stronger. Like you're hitting up against your mark. It doesn't feel good, but like, it intuitively after you grow, like, okay, I get it. Like you're building stronger muscles. But I was like, that's what it feels like when you actually finally start not only prioritizing yourself, but going in alignment there. Like you are not used to doing that. So your brain is like all these reasons why that's bad. And like, you haven't done the good thing, it doesn't feel good. And so for me, I thought like, once I hit it, it's going to feel good. Like I'm going to know, and it's going to be like, I'm in alignment, but it takes time because like, I felt bad that I wasn't putting my kids first, or I wasn't saying yes to everybody still, or I wasn't working around the clock. That was a big one. Lack of productivity. When I left my job and I didn't want to work around the clock, that was a little bit like, or I was like, I'm not going to respond to emails. I'm like, what does it say? Like, I'm not being productive anymore. I'm just like kind of started being lazy. And so it was slowly learning all these things. But the first step for me was like, proving to myself that I can do it and sitting with it. What does that feel like? How does that feel? And why does it feel? There's like really being reflective as opposed to in my previous job. And then I'll stop talking for a second, but
you're fine.
Others would give me reviews. You'd have your like manager give you a review and they'd like tell you like, here's what you need to work on. Here's what, like your goals for the next year. And I'm like, for the first time, it was me reflecting, like, what do I want to accomplish? what do I need? What do I think I want to work on? It was, how do I feel with this? And so it was really I focused instead of someone telling me. And that was like, that took me time to be like, it's such a mind shift to think you first versus others, what they're telling you, and like adjust to that. So any of that resonate? Like, it was like,
Yes.
it's like a long process, long process, but it should be a lifelong thing. It's like you're learning that muscle, then you're going to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. It gets like quicker and easier to notice when you're out of alignment. But I hadn't done it for so long. So it was like, where is this coming from?
Well, I think that's a great analogy, because I'm sure everybody has felt sore muscles from a workout, or, like you said, it doesn't feel good when you try and sit down on the couch, but man, it feels good to get those endorphins. So like, that's a great way to compare that. When you do, and I loved what you said about, alignment being something that you do, and then you ask yourself how it feels, because it's going to look different to everybody. And like, I've been working on that lately, like, especially being a mom and in the early seasons and working. And it's like, okay, how did that make me feel? What do I enjoy about my job? What do I enjoy with my free time? Or and I am guilty 100% of like, oh, I don't have time to get on the bike today, or oh, I gotta prioritize this. And it's like, no, you have to prioritize what makes you tick. And like you said, that's gonna just catapult you into a next level of efficiency, productivity, happiness, everything that
I know.
But it's not recognized for the grind. And like you said, with your manager coming to you with goals and produce. It's like, well, if their burnout is real, I think COVID, that's kind of when my turning point was with burnout, and just constantly go, and being locked down, being isolated, all the things that you're not supposed to do as a human.
All the boxes you're not supposed to check, you're like, yep.
We were checking those boxes for sure. So I just think that everything that you shared is so beautiful, and just your perspective, I appreciate on life, on what should make you feel good, on your job, so if you want to share, like, I'm sure a lot of the emotions that maybe you were experiencing through leaving your job, and how you kind of transitioned into coaching. And I would love for you to just kind of share that experience a little bit, because I'm sure it was scary. I mean, anything you do can be scary.
Well, and I'll say, I finally realized, and we'll talk like in a year, it'll be totally different too. But for me, for right now, I realized, so I ran my first retreat in September, and it was for women, called Rediscover You. So it was for like ambitious working women. I was like, I want to create what you wish existed. I wish I had a thing, where I could surround myself with women. It was on the water. It was, anyways, local. So it kind of minimized the barriers to entry, all the excuses why we can't do this. So I was so excited. Like, I decided, it was in September. I decided in March, this is what I need. This is what I need to do. And the excitement leading, like planning it, thinking through it. What do the women need to discuss? What do they need to feel? What do they need to like talk about? What are the activities? Do we need yoga? Like all that stuff. I was excited. And so I leaned into that, and I was like, okay, I haven't been excited about a project in a while, as it got closer, and there was like, probably starting like 3 weeks out, then it started to talk about like the messy middle, right? Then my head got in there, and all the what ifs. What am I really going to teach them? What am I really going to do? And it's that feeling of like, kind of like this, like almost dread, right? But, and then what my mind wanted, my thinking brain wanted to go to, oh, that's a sign I'm doing the wrong thing again, right? Like, I'm having the same feelings I did in my job, the same things happening. I got frustrated with myself. I'm like, I'm never going to figure it out, but I had to sit with it. And in my mind, if I could remove the thought that it's going to be horrible for everyone, and say, no, it's going to be it's going to be so great. It's going to be so great. Like, I could literally feel it lift, and the excitement came back. And so that was the first time for me that I was like, okay, there is a contrast between, you will still feel that because your brain, you're pushing yourself. It's like, someone equated it to me, like, your comfort zone is like the circle around you, right? And every time you do something, you can stay in this tight little circle and you'll be comfortable, or you can push yourself right to the limit of the circle. And every time you get there, it's going to be super uncomfortable, but then the circle is going to get a little wider and a little wider and a little wider. And you may have a really wide comfort circle in your job that you can like run massive projects. You might have a huge team that you're doing, you're whatever, but you're going to do something different. Like, like starting a podcast or running a retreat that only has like 10 women. And in my mind, it's like, I can do that, but it's different. It's a different comfort zone. And so it like constricted again. And so for the first time though, I was like, that's not a sign that I'm misaligned. I can see how there is, when I can remove the thoughts in my brain, or I can calm them down for even a second, underlying all that is still excitement, versus when I was in my job and you have that Sunday night, like dread of like, oh God, I have these meetings and I got to present that, whatever it is, that didn't really, even if I was like, the meeting is going to go amazing, there was still like, it was like this. And so I think, so the learnings for me over the those like 9 months or last year have been how to lean into that, knowing that feeling is going to come and expecting it. Like we talked about, like, it's a muscle that's going to get wider, and trust that like I can do it. But also, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be great. You're going to have like that, the brain's going to want to brain, it's going to want to like think of all these things. And you're going to have to just kind of, as you learn yourself, know your natural rhythms and know that's where it is. It's the dip. It's going to want me to not do anything. And then I'm going to lean into that because there's still this excitement under there. So anyways, that was one of the learnings. The other thing you mentioned too, which is so important. Like I also, when I left my job, I'll use KPI, but like I wanted a metric to measure the success. And clearly financially, like if I was going to replace my salary, that's one thing I can say for my corporate job. But the second thing was like, okay, I left because I wanted to be happier and more fulfilled and have a better relationship with my kids. Like that, you cannot measure. I spent months. I remember I had a post too, like I put this article on LinkedIn and I was like, how can I measure? How do I know that I'm happier? Like, how do you know? And so I would sit with that and I'm like, because you're still going to have it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're going to have the full range of human emotions wherever you are. Right. But I was like, how do I know that I'm happier or that I'm more fulfilled? Because those aren't metrics that I can like, okay, I have this X amount of dollars, or I've, drank X amount of water every day. Those are like the actions that contribute to the outcome. The outcome is the happiness, but like, how do you know? And for me, took time, just trusting the process, that like, keep putting yourself first, thinking about how you're feeling, reflecting, because I never did that, like, how did that actually feel? Like, what did I like in that job? What did I like in that day? What did I like in that interaction? But when I looked back, then I was like, I don't recognize that employee anymore. Just that I can't imagine going back to that. So that's okay. That means growth because I'm not the same. But two, like my relationship with my kids, not that it wasn't bad, but I was very low on patience a lot.
Yes.
My relationship with my husband. And so I think for that too is like, be aware of what success means to you and what you're looking for. There is like, again, I'll go to KPI, like there's key performance, there's metrics that you can measure, but then there is commitments that you make to yourself. And those aren't really measurable. You have to trust, like, to have to be happier. This is what it means for me. It means I am going to spend an hour a day doing X, and I'm going to spend 4, whatever it is, to have a better relationship with my kids. For me, that means I'm going to put my phone down for 1 hour from 5 to 6 every, and make sure I'm just fully invested with them, and do that for a month and look back and see the changes. So it's like, you commit to it and then you don't know until you're back, until you're, right. And so that for me was like, I was like, am I happier? Am I more like, because I'm still having all the feelings that come up. But it's like, you're playing the long game. And I'm like, I can't imagine now going back to the person that I was then. Like, I am so much more, I can control my schedule. I can figure out what I want to do with my kids. I am not stressed when they're sick. And I'm like, oh my God, who's going to cover, what I have to, like, all of those things. I'm like, oh, it's like the lack of stress now that, as opposed to the like euphoric feeling that I thought I'd have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's like, but I'm so much calmer and happier and more present and all of that stuff. So.
Well, that is so beautiful. Oh my gosh. So many good nuggets in there. Like, I love everything you just said. And like you said, like, be aware of what success looks like to
Yeah.
you. So success it's not always a monetary figure. Like
Yeah.
you said, you're calmer, you're happier, you're
Yes.
less stressed. Like
Yeah.
that, like they talk about the blue zones where people live
Yeah.
into their hundreds. Like they're not making six figures, but
No.
so it's not always about that. So it's going to look different for everybody. And oh my gosh, what you shared about the contraction of your circle, your comfort circle, and how you push the boundary a little bit and it grows. And I love that, because I feel like courage takes expanding your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I think another thing you talked about, we all want to belong. That's our human nature. So human nature, we are wired to want to just stay in our safe little bubble. And I'm good. I'm happy with just being comfortable, even though it's not in alignment with myself, but I'm comfortable because this is my circle, even though I'm miserable.
Yeah.
But to, like you said, to just kind of contract and push those boundaries of your comfort zone. And I loved that so much. I love that you called it the messy middle, because I literally felt the messy middle a few days ago. I was driving and I was like, what am I doing? Starting a podcast, and oh my gosh, you don't know anything about the tech. Like, who's going to want to, you know what I mean? So it's just like, you go through, and that's part of the fear, I think, kind of encroaching into when you're pushing on that boundary of your comfort zone. It's like, fear's like, hello, like it's innate in us to, like, it used to be a saber-toothed tiger, like gonna hunt us down. But now it's so, and like you said, to how your brain handles that. And if you can lift those beliefs and sit present with yourself, and lift that mindset or that thought. And then if you still have that feeling underneath of then excitement and passion and heck kind of momentum, then it's right. And I think that is such a great tool for people to take away from, and among many.
Thank you. And just that, like, what helped me too, and I'll just add one thing about that is, you're right. Like, you are, for me and a lot of women who are like in their job, and you're like, okay, but like, I'm going to go, it's out of my comfort zone. Whatever you're doing, you're expanding that circle of comfort. You might be expanding it though, to be comfortable doing stuff you hate, but you're not, like that Sunday night feeling, and like underlying it is like, okay, I'll have to run this meeting, or, I'm doing whatever data entry that, I hate, but like, fine. It becomes normal to feel that way. You are normalizing whatever feeling you're focusing on. So why not take the jump, and that underlying feeling of excitement, know that it's always going to be there. You're always going to, when you push your comfort zone in whatever way, your brain is going to have that automatic feeling of, oh my God, what am I doing? Why? And it's going to try and create all these things, but why not do it in towards something that underlying it all really excites you, versus, like, you can have the meetings that your boss tells you have to run, or the projects you have to work on, and underlying is like, I don't like it, but you can force that feeling too. You're going to sit with it. You'll get more, it'll be normal, whatever, but it's not going to have the excitement with, like, you might as well spend the time on the things that underlying it. You're like, I'm scared as you know what, but after that, can you imagine if, like, all that, you can do it enough, that fear dissipates, you are left with like loving what you're doing, like, oh my God, this is so awesome. And so why not spend the time normalizing that, so you can like spread that circle of comfort a little further, so you can do more of that. So
I love that. No, I love all of that. And I think that's so true, because I think the more you get, like, I did something yesterday where I was uncomfortable with, I approached a conversation that I don't like conflict, but I was like, just talk to the person, because I was building up this narrative in my head of how it was going to go down, and then what the outcome was going to be. And it wasn't that at all. So it's like, like you said, the more you normalize the fear of fear, like having that feeling, or that fear, or that feeling of excitement, or whatever you normalize, make it normal where it's not a bad thing. And then that way it just becomes part of your innate daily process. And like, oh, okay, that seems like it's intimidating, but I'm going to try it anyways and see what happens. And something that has been kind of coming to my head through this whole conversation is, and I think it's fear-based, and like you said, sense of belonging and comfort, and is that instead of saying, well, what's the worst that could happen? Because I think that's where our brain goes. naturally. It's like, not what's the worst that can happen, what's the best that can happen. And some of the feelings that you've shared and like expressed, and oh my gosh, I just got like tingly, like heck yeah feelings, because it's like, yes, like let's feel more like that instead of normalizing
you're so right.
This is hard, or, so anyways, I just like, what's the best that could happen, not the worst.
I mean, it's proven scientifically, your brain does look, because it's trying to avoid danger. I mean, it's going to automatically go there. It's like a pathway in your brain, right? That's been paved. It's like the most well-traveled road. What is not traveled is what could be great. What could be great. And like sitting in that excited feeling and getting used to that, because that road is the one that needs to be more paved. Like it's just, it's naturally innate, and you're right. It doesn't mean you're ignoring. You don't need to, because it will automatically come back. You will always be thinking, your brain will think about those things, but like it is an effort to like, and if you put it in there, like how great could it be? How great could it be? It's so like, there's so many things on the other side of that. Like that little inkling in your mind, that's like a whisper I've heard other people say, is like, it's there for a reason. You've just gotten really good at quieting it, but listen to it, because it's telling you like what could be unlocked for you that's unique to you, that you're like gut, brain, mind, whatever it is that you like wants you to go towards. And so explore that and just see how that feels.
Absolutely. Something else you shared was the outcome is in the happiness. And I think sometimes also is that, just like what I shared, avoiding a conversation because I had an expectation of the outcome.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's like you were talking about the data points and having a trajectory and having a formula. Like, no, it's in the experience. So I think to release the expectations and to explore more, like you said, what feels good to me, or do this for a month and see what happens and how I feel afterwards. And so I just think that's so important too, in release, like, especially like for me in this podcast, for example, I have no outcome other than I'm showing up to talk to awesome, incredible women and them share their stories. And I love it. I don't care if
just sink into that. Like this I want to talk to you for hours and I want to do it every day. I'm like, okay, great. That's what we're doing, like how great is that? Like it's
100%.
And then all the tech and everything, is I'm there with you, that. And I'm like, God, if I could just like focus on like, I could show up at whatever time it is for us right now. And like, I'm in the middle of the week and just have amazing conversations with women that are like, yes, I get you. I get you. And it's like, it's just so fulfilling. And I'm like, okay, I got to keep go through all the doubt that you have, but like, this is why you do it. Right.
Well, feelings that I get from calls like this, like when I get off this call with you, I'm going to have the best afternoon because I just had a wonderful conversation with a wonderful human being. Yeah. And that's what lights me up. That's what fuels my fire. So to focus on that. And like you said, and to have those taking you into those moments of the dip or the uncertainty and just remember those and say, this is what I want to feel like. Normalize the good feelings, not the scary, the anxiety, the overwhelm,
which is going to be there. And then don't make that more than it should be, right? That's going to come. Okay, great. But like, there's also these, so many good things we forget about too. So I tell you, cause that's me. That's what I forget about at least.
Focus on the good, not the bad. So
crazy.
Oh my gosh, Brooke, I love everything about this conversation. You've provided me with so many great tools that I've been taking notes and writing things down. And
you're sweet.
Looking back, I mean, through this trajectory that you've been through the last few years, hindsight 2020, what would you have told your old self before stepping into this season of courage, knowing what you know now? I mean, you're still kind of in the wilderness a little bit, moving forward with your coaching business and kind of exploring, but so you're still in it, but like, I feel like some of the scarier parts or the fearful parts are behind you. So maybe what could you share with our listeners that you've learned?
How do I succinctly say is just, I did not listen to the feelings that were coming up for me for a while. And I guess I wasn't nice to myself, meaning if I think about what I was telling myself, like even right out of school, if I wanted to switch a job or I was like, either, because I wasn't happy where, again, like I've said it before, but, you can't figure out what you like. So that's why you're making the change, or, it's too much, too hard. You stick it out to prove yourself, so there's like this kind of underlying thing that for me to follow what my gut was telling me meant something negative about me, that I couldn't stick with something. It was shiny object syndrome, that it was too hard, so I would like stay places longer than I should. I wouldn't listen to what until, like I said, I turned 40 and I was finally like, where did I get this feeling that like, if I followed what I wanted, that was me being lazy or like not grateful for what I already had. And like, what if I had done that from the get-go? And like, what I want to try for my kids is, I have this feeling, and I think it's generational too, which is like, even my grandparents' generation, you stayed with your job, you had a pension. So I think there was this period of, you can follow what you want. But now I'm like, if I had done all the trying things out when I was 20, right out of school, I don't even know. And hindsight, like you said, is 2020. So I learned amazing things too with all the stuff. But like, I just wonder, like, if I knew myself by the time I was 30, and granted, I wouldn't have kids, so you continue to learn, but like, where would I be now? And so I think the thing is like, if you have that whisper, if you have that, it is not, and it doesn't mean jump ship, but like, it is telling you something, and don't ignore it. And it doesn't mean that you're not grateful for what you have. And it doesn't mean that others don't have it worse, but it also doesn't mean that you're lazy and you can't cut it. It just means you could do something way more and better, And so flip that voice in your head. I think at least anyone who is where I was, and telling yourself it meant something about like, you couldn't cut it or you weren't grateful. And that's absolutely not it. So anyways, listen to it. You know that there's a little thing there, and it doesn't have to be this loud, like, when you're looking forward to, for me, maternity leave, or, oh my God, I get some time off. Like, that's probably a sign that like, it's not in a line, like there's probably something else out there. So anyways, that's
not feeling guilty or shame for having an intuitive feeling about something, but to more listen to it, honor it, and think of a positive perspective, or what could happen, what could become of this, or where should I be curious in my life, or where
like
should
how
I be
great,
open?
like you said, how great could it be? And you're not running away from something, you're running towards like a better, who knows what type of future,
And people grow and people change, and we continue to grow and evolve and change through our entire lives. We never stay the same. The only thing constant is change.
So good.
So I think that's such a great, because I think again, it comes back to fear, us trying to protect ourselves, like that voice inside, we go to the excuses or the negative thoughts that hold us back versus launch us forward. I think that's so beautiful. Oh my gosh, Brooke, thank you.
Lesley.
Oh my gosh, you're amazing.
I
love what you're doing. I love your story, and I'm so glad that we
talking to you
cross paths. And could you share with the listeners where they could find you?
Yes. So I have a website. It's www.brookek.com. Don't try and spell my last name. So it's BROOKEK.com. And then my Instagram is Brooke K Coaching. So it's probably two best places to find me. So.
Awesome, Brooke.
And I have a podcast coming out. It's called Embracing the Messy Middle, January 9th. It's coming out. And so that'll be out too. So hearing more stories like this too, which I can't wait to chat with you on that side.
I love it. Awesome. Well, I am so excited for you. I'm here to support your journey.
Gosh, Lesley, you too.
And thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Of course. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for joining me and listening to the Kindred Journey Podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please consider taking the time to rate and review the podcast, and share this episode with family and friends who you think might enjoy it. Your positive feedback helps me reach more courageous women like you. This is my passion project, so without you, I wouldn't be here doing this, and I deeply appreciate your support. Until next time.